Good evening. Welcome to the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education meeting of October 17th, 2016. Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Centers?
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mrs. Laura?
Here.
Mrs. McDonald?
Here.
Mrs. Bonifield is here. President Burton?
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Mrs. Laura, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance,
I'd be
please?
happy to. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to our meeting this evening. We are excited to be here and have some celebratory activities along with the regular routine business of our school board. If you are following along in our room and if you'd like an agenda, they can be found just outside the door on the table. If you would like to participate in the audience communications, which will be coming up shortly, there are some blue slips and you can fill out one of those and just put it on the end of the table, and that way it will get to me and I'll make sure that I call on you at the appropriate time. If you're following along at home and you would like an agenda, you can find one on our website. They can be found at www.livoniapublicschools.org. If you hover over the school board tab and drop down to agendas, you'll find the agenda for this evening and you can follow along. This evening's meeting is a regular meeting or a general meeting as we call them. The items, what that means is that the items that are coming before the board right now have been discussed typically at least 2 prior meetings. Therefore, you may or may not see the depth of conversation and discussion about these items before we vote on them. Please know that that is not because we are taking these items lightly or we're not having conversation about them, but rather it is because we've had rather deep conversation at least a couple of other meetings before they get to a vote for tonight. If you're interested in the conversation of the Board of Education in more depth on some of these issues, I really encourage you to tune into our Committee of the Whole meetings. They're open to the public to attend, and they are televised. They're also put up on our website. So if you are interested in those, I do encourage you to tune in. That's where we have a lot of discussion, a lot of back and forth, sometimes some requests for more information from our administration, and we really beat up some issues before we bring them up to a vote on an evening such as tonight. As far as the agenda for this evening, we do have, as I said, some celebratory activities near the beginning of our meeting. As is the custom with our board, we're going to take a brief recess after item 3C, and that is to have an opportunity for the board and those who are in attendance in the audience this evening to congratulate some of our honorees and thank some of our donors to the district for this evening. The next item on our agenda this evening is item 3, communications, and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Jenkins.
Thank you. Good evening, President Burton, members of the board, Superintendent Oquist. Tonight we welcome the first installation of the Student Art Gallery for this school year, as you can notice on the board behind you, and there's one piece up here on the board table. This month we're featuring the talents of 5 Churchill High School students who were selected by their art teachers, Janet Stack and Tracy Altman, to have their works on display here at the board office. As you may recall, the Student Art Gallery program was established 4 years ago already by former board trustee Julie Robinson as a way to recognize the abundance of artistic talents throughout our district. Churchill High School has several art classes, including sculpture, painting, drawing, jewelry, and photography, and also houses the National Art Honors Society program. The art department is led by Janet Stack, who is with us this evening in the front row. Thanks for being here. And has 210 students total in the art department. Tonight we have the works of just 5 of those talented artists, so this is kind of a big deal to be selected out of that many students to have their work on display for about the next month here in the board office. We have certificates for each artist, and those read Livonia Public Schools, Certificate of Recognition, Student Art Gallery, Featured Artist, selected to represent the Churchill High School Art Department at the Board of Education Board Office, October 17th, 2016. Those are signed, by the way, by our superintendent and by myself. Now, I think we are playing this really by ear because I only recognize one student who is able to make it, but I'm going to go ahead and read through all of the names. We understand that plans can change at the last minute. So first on our list, we have Destiny Banks, who is a senior at Churchill, and I'll look around last minute here to see if Destiny has joined us. Doesn't look like she was able to join us, so we will make sure that those who were unable to be here will get their certificates. Can I give those to you, Mrs. Stack? Okay. Second, we have Cameron Burke. I should point out which work is Destiny's. The Marilyn Monroe piece, I believe, is Destiny's.
That's very nice.
Cameron Burke, who is a junior. Going once. Okay, Cameron's work is the upper right there. The interesting, I don't know if that's a graphic image, a photograph, okay. We'll make sure that Cameron gets his certificate. Next, we have Kaylee Turnbull. Kaylee has joined us this evening. Come on up, Kaylee. And I'll let you point out your piece, if you will.
I created the wolf drawing up there.
Okay, that's awesome. Someone asked you earlier, how many hours did it take you?
About 20 hours of drawing.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow, lots of work goes into these pieces. Here's your certificate, Kaylee. Thanks for being with us
Thank you very
tonight.
much.
And I know we have Paige Hansen wasn't feeling well, so we'll make sure that Paige gets her certificate. And Paige created the sculpture that's on the board table. And that appears to be a camera, some sort of camera contraption with, looks like a teapot.
Yeah. Yep.
It's very neat, it's ceramic. And lastly, Emily Lane, who is a senior. So Emily's piece is the tile work there of the state of Michigan.
Really cool.
And we heard from today that Emily is not able to make it at the last minute as well. So join me in congratulating these artists and thanking them for sharing their work. And also be sure to stop by and check out the works in the lobby. Those are, the lobby display this month is by Franklin High School art students. Pretty awesome work out there too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And during our break this evening also, if members of the audience would like to come up and take a closer look, some of the detail when you get up close is really amazing. So please do feel free to come on up and enjoy this a little bit closer. Congratulations again, and thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for sharing an otherwise rather boring beige wall with us. It's a whole lot more fun to look at your work than it is to look at the wallpaper. Yeah. The next item on our agenda this evening is item 3B, the Team Effort Award, the Technology Bond Professional Development Committee. Mrs. Jenkins.
Okay, thank you, President Burton. I'm going to kind of take you on a little story here, so bear with me. Remember the days of chalkboards and overhead projectors with transparencies that were very dependent upon the legible handwriting of your teacher? If the teacher's writing wasn't just right, there could be a problem, right? Think back even further to recall the old reel-to-reel movie projectors and those purple ink dittos that were used in our classrooms. I still remember my 5th grade job. I was so proud. I was picked to run the dittos on this machine that was the size of a car. It was pretty awesome. We'll flash forward to May of 2013 when voters in our community approved a bond issue that would fund major updates to our buildings and bring some state-of-the-art technology to our classrooms. Today, it's not uncommon to see our students working on Chromebooks in the classroom or engaging in a lesson while the teacher literally brings the world to the large whiteboard via an interactive projector that's connected to the internet. And those are just a couple of examples of the use of technology in our classrooms today. Well, these things do not just happen in our district. Our staff needs to learn the technology first, experiment with it, and determine the best ways to deliver the curriculum with these new tools in hand. Leading this effort is a team that is headed up by our Chief Academic Officer, Mrs. Sheila Alice. The Technology Bond Professional Development Committee was established 4 years ago for the purpose of developing programs to support the incoming classroom technology on a variety of levels for approximately 1,000 staff members. Not an easy task. They started with a blank slate, since a full-day, all-district professional development program that focused on the single topic of technology had never been attempted in our district. The result was a multi-year program called Level Up. You may have heard of Level Up, which took place one day in late August for 3 years in a row at Churchill High School. The format for Level Up entailed a keynote speaker who is an expert in the fields of education and technology, followed by breakout sessions, up to 35 different offerings, scheduled in 50-minute sessions. Those breakout sessions were primarily led by LPS teachers who were willing to share their expertise about how they use various technology in their classrooms. For example, how they would use Google Apps in the classroom. This created a peer-to-peer teaching and sharing model that is so effective. Once the instructional aspects were finalized, the committee dealt with the equally important issues of bringing on the food trucks, which lined up around Churchill's Loop there, and Big B Coffee, just to make sure that the teachers kept well-fed and caffeine-fueled for the entire day. For their awesome work on Level Up 1.0, Level Up 2.0, and Level Up 3.0, Mrs. Alice decided to formally recognize this team by nominating its members for a Team Effort Award. In her nomination, she writes, "The creative thinking, tenacity, perseverance, and persistence of the committee allowed us to create a fabulous professional development program that included a combination of new knowledge shared with 1,000 teachers and administrators, followed by individual choice to support personal preferences." The committee worked each year to make a more responsive program for the teachers as well. Through follow-up surveys, they were always looking for ways to make each year better than the last. At this time, I would like to ask Trustee Mark Johnson to join me at the podium, and we would like to honor each member of the committee, and we've created these special team effort certificates for each member. I'll go ahead and read the certificate. Livonia Public Schools Team Effort Award, presented to the recipient for outstanding involvement and collaborative effort on the Livonia Public Schools Technology Bond Professional Development Committee, October 17th, 2016. And those are signed by the superintendent and by Board President Colleen Burton. So Trustee Johnson is going to help me introduce each person and hand the certificates out.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. First of all, I want to thank the committee because, as you heard Mrs. Jenkins indicate, these were a bunch of very courageous individuals because they took on a task of trying to put together a program that would apply to 1,000 teachers in the district on a subject that is technology, that some people find to be very dry. Other people, particularly this committee, finds it to be rather exciting. But it's a daunting task to try and put together a program like this. And they didn't do it just 1 year. They didn't do it just 2 years. They've done it 3 years in a row. So we want to thank this committee for all the work that they've put in, because this is really going to help our students in this district, because it helps the teachers then be able to put forth their best efforts. So again, thank you for all you've done on this committee. The first name that I have is Judy Bowling. Is Judy here? Karen Comise. Thank you, Karen. A lot of work. Appreciate it. Tim Clan. Thank you for the hard work. Appreciate it. Jill Manchester, Media Specialist at Garfield Elementary. David Mitchell, Technology Teacher at Holmes. Christine Mitchell, World Language Teacher, retired. She's unable to be here tonight. You'll make sure she gets her certificate.
Yes.
Lisa Czar, Media Specialist at Randolph and Rosedale, and I understand she is not here.
And the leader of the pack.
And the leader of the pack, who is this? Sheila, how do you pronounce it? Oh, Alice. Chief Academic Officer.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, Trustee Johnson. And we invite Mrs. Ellis to say a few words about this incredible committee. Mrs. Ellis?
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins, and thank you, Mr. Johnson, for your eloquent words in summing up the essence of this committee. Level Up was truly a tremendously enormous undertaking and a tremendously successful accomplishment solely because of this tremendously talented group of people that I had the privilege and honor of working with these past 3 years. I was just saying to them before the meeting, I was asking them if they were going through any meeting withdrawals, because by now we would have met twice. We met at least once a month after school. This team gave their own time for those meetings, planning meetings. And then during the summer, we met for 2 hours every other week at Barnes & Noble to plan Level Up 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. Our teachers and our administrators they've enhanced their use of technology, they've expanded their knowledge about apps and their use of apps, and they've brought new technology tools into our schools and into our classrooms because of this fabulous group of staff members that I've had the honor and the privilege of working with, but also all of our teachers and our administrators who presented at Level Up. 85% of our presenters were our own staff members who were sharing their knowledge, their skills, and their expertise with technology with their colleagues. And so we're very fortunate to be working in a school district that values and honors the work of sharing with each other. And this group certainly shared their time, their skill, their efforts, in helping to grow technology into our schools and into our classrooms. So thank you for recognizing their efforts tonight. It's truly been a privilege to work with them. Thank you.
That's all I have. Do we have questions or comments from members of the board or the superintendent?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your
Thank
hard
you.
work.
And thank you also for inviting the board members to drop in to Level Up when we can. I know it's been really fun to stop in. And as folks have gone to other seminars on various topics, usually related to either their interest or their profession, this worked the same way, where teachers get to choose what is most applicable to their classrooms. And I remember when I was able to stop into one of the very first ones that was being offered, 1.0, one of our middle school teachers was giving examples beyond just the academics of what we can use from or glean from the internet, but how we can also reach the student and enrich their lives personally. And he gave the example, he was a middle school teacher, and he said that this is the time period when using cell phones was just beginning to be acceptable in a classroom. Just turn the corner there. And he said it was exciting to be able to break the students up into small groups, and that there was going to be one student in each group who's going to use their cell phone, their iPad, whatever it was, their technology device, and everyone had to get with one of these students. And he said, very intentionally, it wasn't the basketball star or the all-A student, but it was one of the students I chose for each group who may have often gotten overlooked. But for that hour, for that day, they were the go-to kid. And that's just something that if you've been in a classroom of 12 and 13-year-olds, that kind of gives you shivers. So in addition to all of the academics and the vast amount of information, there are real ways to reach kids with technology also.
President Burton?
Yes, Mrs. Oquist.
I don't want to share too much more beyond that Mrs. Alice and you and President Burton or Mr. Johnson have shared. But if you think about the task of any professional development in a district our size, Mr. Johnson talked about 1,000 teachers. 1,000 teachers across the continuum of technology is pretty significant. I think the planning team can certainly attest to that. So not only to find enough presenters that can provide these breakout sessions, but to provide a keynote speaker that is engaging and enlightening and inspiring for 1,000 staff members. And I have to say this year, each year they have, but this year they really knocked it out of the park, having George Curls kick off our event. And we had so many staff members comment that Level Up is one of the most meaningful professional development opportunities that they have each year. One, they have the opportunity to hear from a keynote expert in the field that really gets them revved up and excited about the use of technology and connecting with kids and with our community in a different way. But secondly, they have the opportunity, as you shared, President Burton, to personalize their learning, to make a choice about their learning. So that's not always easy to accomplish with 1,000 teachers. It's a little easier when you've got a group of 20 or 30, but in a district our size, that is no small feat. So Mrs. Alice shared a little bit with you about the time that it takes to do that, and all of that time was on this team's own time. And so we are grateful for their efforts. We're grateful for the leadership, continued leadership of Mrs. Alice in this regard, and we're pretty proud of the work that they've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, thank you again to the team. It was a remarkable accomplishment. The next item on our agenda this evening, and the last one before our break, is item 3C, a gift from ZF-TRW Automotive. Mrs. Jenkins.
Thank you, President Burton. As I mentioned earlier with the student art gallery that we are playing it by ear, we did have a student just arrive. Would it be too much to ask if we presented her with
Absolutely.
her certificate
Please do.
before we move on?
Yep.
Okay, great. We've got Destiny Banks. And Destiny, you are a junior? Senior. Oh, sorry. There you are, Destiny.
Thank you.
And which work is yours up there?
The Marilyn Monroe.
Marilyn Monroe. And I don't know if everyone can see, but you want to explain how you did that a little bit? The backdrop is, go ahead.
The backdrop is a newspaper. It's just newspaper that ripped apart and I glued onto the canvas. And then I painted the Marilyn Monroe on top of the newspaper.
So neat. Very nice. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad you
Thank
could be
you.
with us tonight. And let's give Destiny a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad that you were able to join us. There's a lot of things going on this evening, and
Yes.
previous commitments have kept several people from all their activities. Now we're on to 3C.
Okay. Tonight it's my pleasure to bring a gift to the Board of Education for formal acceptance. For 17 years now, 17 years, ZF-TRW here in Livonia has been a generous corporate supporter of our district. Each year, our friend John Wilkerson brings a check for $3,500 for early literacy programs and $1,500 to support our Livonia Public Schools Education Foundation. Livonia Public Schools has committed this TRW donation each year to use for early literacy programs. To date, the total amount donated by TRW over the past 17 years is a whopping $79,000. Wow. Wow. And I would love to bring our good friend, Mr. John Wilkerson, to the podium, along with Mrs. Sheila Alice, our Chief Academic Officer, who will describe how the funds are normally used and what we plan to do with this year's donation.
Thank you once again for the generous gift to our early literacy, support our early literacy initiatives. As Mrs. Jenkins said, over the past 17 years, donations from TRW have been used to support our early literacy initiatives, from resources in the classroom, resources for teachers, and professional development to support our youngest readers and writers. Last year's very generous gift was used to purchase additional copies of the Teacher Resource Writing Pathways. Each of our schools in their school improvement plans had identified ways that they would like to use this resource with their teachers for professional development as part of their school improvement plans. And we needed funds to be able to support our schools in the purchase of this resource. And we were able to use some of our grant funds, but the additional funds from TRW enabled us to purchase this resource to meet all of the requests of all of our schools. And so we're truly appreciative of the support that you provided in the past, specifically last year. And so this year's funds are going to be used to support our earliest readers in an attempt to ensure that all of our readers are reading on grade level. So we're going to be looking at some specific resources based on what our teachers indicate their needs are, so that our kindergarten, first, second, and third graders are reading on grade level before they leave that grade level. Once again, thank you. Please know that your donations from TRW and now ZFTRW continue to make a difference in the lives of our youngest readers and writers, and we are truly appreciative for your ongoing and gracious support.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Ellis. So I'm just going to... All right, just going to say a couple of words, and I see some themes from what I'm experiencing here tonight, and one of them is dedication, the dedication of Livonia Public Schools to the many programs that are going on, and there's a foundation that needs to be set for young readers and writers. And it's kind of funny because I see a juxtaposition between the discussion on the technology in the schools that we talked about, and I think about, well, texting may not be the greatest of reading and writing, but, what we need to do is to give this foundation to the youngest students and get them passionate about reading and writing. These are, I think, the most important skills, obviously math as well. Just want to mention a few things. I mean, this is the early literacy grant. We also are going to this year to support STEM education with the Livonia Warriors robotics team in first. We've also, Ms. Palicelli is going to get the $1,500 for the foundation, and we also have an Adopt a Family program that we do every year at Christmas, usually at the lowest socioeconomic schools where kids get a Christmas. We've adopted typically about 15 families each year. So it's a labor of love to come and work with Livonia Public Schools, because the things that I see, the students that we're doing, the art programs, the kids who are going to really get a chance to get more materials for reading and writing, it's a great opportunity for us to give back to the community that gives so much to us. So thanks so much to the members of the board and President Burton, to Superintendent Oquist for having us back, and we're thrilled again to be giving this gift. So thanks to all.
Thank you.
I'd also love to invite Mrs. Diane Palicelli to the podium for a quick thank you from the foundation. Mrs. Palicelli, as you know, is the president of the LPS Education Foundation.
Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. It is my honor to represent the Livonia Public Schools Education Foundation and to thank you, John and ZFTRW, for your generous gift. As we heard, John and ZFTRW have been friends of the Education Foundation and of Livonia Public Schools for many, many years. Your generosity is greatly appreciated, and your gift specifically for the foundation has supported the mission of the foundation, which is to increase educational opportunities both in the short term and the long term, and we are most appreciative. Thank you so much. We value your friendship, sir.
Are there questions or comments from the board or superintendent?
We look forward to seeing him next year.
Thank you. President Jarvis, or Mr. Centers.
I just want to take a minute to acknowledge, when cities attract local businesses, they hope to get people that employ people that, don't cause any harm to the city or the environment. And then they hope that maybe they'll go beyond that and be good corporate citizens. TRW is an excellent corporate citizen for Livonia. They're well known in the community, not just for for what they do for their business, but also what they give back. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.
And before we can continue with a few other comments, I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion, which I should have done a few minutes ago. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the generous donation of $3,500 from ZFTRW Automotive to Livonia Public Schools.
Support.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mrs. Laura. Other comments from board members? Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Burton. I would love to extend thanks to you, Mr. Wilkerson, as well as to ZFTRW, not only for the past years, but for hopefully a long and fruitful partnership. When our organization, our school district can work with community businesses, it's a win-win situation, and that's one of my favorite things to see. So thank you.
Other comments from board members of the superintendent? Mrs. Oquist.
John, it's great to see you again. We are so appreciative of the ongoing support. You are a big catalyst of bringing that support to the children that we serve. And certainly ZFTRW, as Trustee Centers mentioned, is a very valued partner. We are just continuously wowed by the support of our business community. You are one of our important partners in that. Your long-term support shows us your dedication, not only to our school district, but most importantly to the students we serve. One of the things I know that you've mentioned as you've graciously given this gift each year is that you've asked for sustainability, that this gift be something that can be kept for many years to either support the growth and development of our teachers as they become more effective with our youngest learners, or materials that can be used year after year after year. And so I know certainly our academic services department has held to that. And the materials that we have been able to purchase are things that are not only used this year or not just last year, but that get continued use each and every year. And I believe that was one of the significant requests that was made, was that this be sustainable as we move forward.
Superintendent Oquist, it's to me gone beyond expectations. Every time that we've given a gift, it's always been institutionalized somewhere across the entire school system, particularly in early literacy, but also, as you said, to teach the teachers how to use these materials, have these materials available. So, again, it's just great to start a foundation for kids who can then grow and be able to do more and more as they work through the Livonia schools and then go on to great lives as adults.
Yes, so thank you. Thank you for your continued friendship and partnership.
Any other comments from board members? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mrs. Laura. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
And President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We are now, as I mentioned at the beginning of our meeting, going to take a brief 5 to 10 minute recess in order to congratulate our honorees of the evening. Please, if you're in our audience this evening, feel free to do so, or as we mentioned, feel free to come up and take another look a little bit closer at some of the beautiful art that's been brought in for us. We are now at recess. Good evening and welcome to the continuation of the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education meeting, October 17th, 2016. We are rejoining our agenda at this point with item 3D, written communications. Do any members of the board have any written communications that they would like to share? Seeing none, the next item is 3E, audience communications. Does anybody, I do not have any blue slips from anybody. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to participate in audience communications at this time? Seeing none, the next item on our agenda is 3F, response to prior audience communications. I do not have any response to prior audience communications either at this time. The next item on our agenda, we're clipping right along here, is item 4, consent agenda. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton. President Burton.
Yes, Mrs. McDonald.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the following consent agenda items as recommended by the superintendent. 5A, minutes of the regular meeting of September 19th, 2016. 7A, bills for payment, October 18th, 2016.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. McDonald, supported by Mr. Centers. And Mrs., let me see, are there any questions or comments on the consent agenda this evening? No? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. McDonald, supported by Mr. Centers. Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 6, personnel matters. 6A is appointment director of operations. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mr. Johnson.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and employ Mr. Philip Francis for the position of Director of Operations effective October 18th, 2016.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. And Mrs. Oquist, are you going to be addressing this item?
I am.
Okay.
I'm so pleased to bring this recommendation to you this evening. I'd like to just give a little bit of background about the role and then talk a little bit about Mr. Francis, if I may. So as you know, in our district previously, the roles of both finance and operations were previously separated into 2 separate departments, and they had someone overseeing each of those. About 6 years ago, Mrs. Lisa Abbey, who was most recently our Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations, oversaw the operations in both the Business Services Department, Operations and Maintenance, and all of the related departments. Since her departure, we are going to look to fill the roles and responsibilities of each of those, again, as separate positions. We certainly believe that the Director of Operations, who will be overseeing operations, maintenance, food service, transportation, energy, and also we will be adding informational technology, is a significant undertaking in a district our size. As you may know, we have almost 30 facilities, and we cover over 3 million square feet. In addition, we have dozens of buses on the road each and every day. I could go on and on, but then Mr. Francis may change his mind before we get to the appointment portion. So we worked to do some restructuring within our central office positions. We were doing some restructuring within our finance department. Previously, we had our assistant superintendent, Ms. Abbey. We had an administrator for finance, Mr. Armeligus, and a manager of finance, Allison Smith. So we will be moving from 3 administrative positions to 2 in that office, and we will be adding the Director of Operations position. So that will be funded by the reorganization of positions within central office. So let me spend a little bit of time talking about Mr. Francis, and then I'd like to invite him to come up to the podium. Mr. Francis has been with our district for 21 years. Hard to believe. As young as he looks, right, Mr. Francis? He's been with us as a classroom teacher, as a building principal, as a K-12 administrator, and has been part of cabinet in the role of Assistant Director of Human Resources. One of the most significant responsibilities Mr. Francis has had in the recent past is overseeing all of our federal grants, including our Title I funds and all related federal grants for our entire school district. He has served in the role, again, as a teacher and an administrator, but he has also worked here at central office with all of our building principals, and most recently in our role in the Human Resources Department. He truly has done an exceptional job in the role he is in, and it was a difficult decision to make the determination to ask him to take on a different set of responsibilities. I do that quite confidently. I'm going to share a little bit formally about his education background, but then I'll also share a little bit about how Mr. Francis works within our system. Mr. Francis has a BA in history from the University of Michigan, went through a teacher certification program in secondary education at Eastern, has his master's degree in cognitive impairment and transitional specialist from Wayne State, has his ed specialist in educational leadership and administration through Oakland University, and also has completed his coursework toward his doctorate in educational leadership and administration through Eastern Michigan University. So certainly he is very well educated. He also has a tremendous amount of experience within our district. In addition to his roles, one of the ways I believe that his colleagues and those he serves would describe him is someone who is a problem solver. His work ethic is really exceptional. He has the ability to analyze information, make decisions about what is best, and be able to move forward in a way that values the people that we serve, but also values the organization to whom we're responsible. I think he will do an outstanding job, certainly being out and about in our schools and in each of those departments to look for efficiencies and continue to keep each of those areas as strong a departments as they are. We are very fortunate to have tremendous supervisors in each of those areas, but to have a cabinet member who is directly interacting with not only those supervisors, but as importantly with the schools that we serve, will be a really important piece for us moving forward. We believe Phil will do just an outstanding job in that, not only because of his skill set. Certainly he is a very outstanding thinker, very intelligent, but also recognizes that our human resources are truly our best asset in this district. So I'd like to, after you have the opportunity to vote on this appointment, invite Mr. Francis to come and join us at the podium.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield confidently says yes. And President Burton?
Yes, and this group has a little fun every now and then.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Congratulations, Phil.
Welcome to your new role.
Yeah, very funny. Everyone's very funny tonight.
Yeah.
So I just
Trying to be.
I just want to very quickly say thank you. Thank you for the kind words, Andrea. That was, tremendous. I actually appreciate the folks from Human Resources coming and staying the evening. I'm fairly convinced they sleep here at this time of year anyway, so they probably are just taking a little break from their work. But thank you, everybody, my cabinet colleagues who I actually love working with. They've been tremendous, and one of the things I told Andrea when we discussed this was I want to keep working with them. I don't want to, be isolated somewhere working on these other things. I want to continue working with them because they have great ideas. They're great thinkers, and we work really well together. So I appreciate all of you. Dana's giving me the stink eye right now, but I also want to quickly say my wife, Jennifer Hardy Francis, media specialist over at Churchill High School, is here this evening. So I appreciate you being with me and putting up what she thinks this. I don't know why she thinks that this might be better hours. I don't know what you're thinking, but but anyway, I want to thank all of you. I appreciate your confidence. I've really enjoyed since day one that I started in HR and working on cabinet. It's an incredible group. I am going to miss doing the things I was doing, but this is another step, another challenge, and I look forward to it. So, again, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. And let me see here. We have, the next item on our agenda is item 6B, teachers for approval. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mr. Centers.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and offer employment for the 2016-17 school year to the teachers listed on the attached document.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mr. Johnson. Mr. Winry, are you going to address this for us?
Yes, thank you. All the teachers that are recommended tonight have been interviewed along with other applicants for the vacancies that we have in our instructional programs. And we believe that the ones that we have brought before you are the most qualified for the positions here in Livonia schools, and we recommend them for employment.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations and officially welcome. We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mr. Johnson. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is 6C, teachers for tenure. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. Jarvis.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and grant tenure status to the following teachers effective on their respective dates. To Jillian Hall, October 6, 2016. Maris Hoppy, October 21st, 2016.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. McDonald. Mr. Winry.
Thank you. Administration has received affirmative reports and recommendations for tenure for the employees that you've listed in your motion, and they are completing the required years of service this month, and we recommend approval of the motion on the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. McDonald. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 6D, retirements. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. Laura.
thank you. Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached resolutions of appreciation for services rendered by Louise Feltek, Beverly Tuttle.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Laura, supported by Mrs. McDonald. Let me see here. Mr. Winry.
Thank you. Well, there's only two employees tonight that we bring before you. Those two employees account for approximately 42 years of service to the school district. On behalf of administration, I'd certainly like to extend our appreciation for their long service and their dedicated and loyal time with the district, and we recommend that the board approve the resolution of appreciation.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you so much for your service. And enjoy the next chapter of your lives. We have a motion by Mrs. Laura, supported by Mrs. McDonald. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 7, business matters. We've taken care of 7A, and 7B is our audit report for 2015-2016. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton?
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the 2015-2016 audit report as presented by the audit firm of Plant Moran.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mr. Centers. And we would be hearing from Allison Smith. However, Allison Smith gave birth to her first baby boy on Sunday evening, so congratulations from the board and from the district to Mrs. Smith. And we are privileged to have Mike Dixon, who is working very closely with Allison, who is going to present this evening.
Good, and thank you. First of all, I think we've been through this the last couple of meetings, but just for the community, we have a state law that requires the outside independent audit of the school district's finances be conducted on an annual basis, and the district has retained the services of Plant Moran to provide that audit. Tonight we have with us Teresa Pollock and Tom Marchese to present the findings from the audit. But before they do that, I just want to make a couple of general comments. First of all, the fund balance came in about $2.8 million, a little bit higher than what we had expected it to come in at. And that's a good sign because we now have, as far as the state's concerned, we're out of the 5% range. We're a little bit above the 5% range and just a little bit over 6, just under 6.5. And some of the causes in the variance there had to really do with a little bit of revenue that came in, about 600 and some thousand, just over $600,000 higher than what we had anticipated it to. Those were property taxes that came in a little bit higher, and some of the state aid categorical funds came in a little bit higher. On the expenditure side, we had a variance of about 1.5% against the expenditures, about $2.1 million, just under $2.2 million. That variance came in at about $965,000 in expenditures. It had to do with staff. A lot of mid-year vacancies hadn't been filled right away and things of that nature. And then the non-employee related costs were about just under $1.2 million. And those areas were in the contracted subs, the heating, electric, maintenance supplies, transportation supplies, things of that nature. So we have about an $8.3 million fund balance, which is good. It takes you out of the early warning legislation, or at least that component of the fund balance component of the early warning legislation. And you're in pretty good shape. That's a good way to end the year. So with that, I'll give it to Teresa and Tom, unless you have questions. Do we do questions?
Thank you very much. It's our pleasure to join you again this evening.
Good evening.
Our role, obviously, as your independent auditors, is to express an opinion on the financial statements. As part of the audit, there are essentially 3 reports that are delivered to the district: the basic financial statements, the single audit, which is our test of the district's compliance with the laws and regulations relative to its federal grant programs, and then a separate report to the board. And we know we've already gone through those reports in a fair level of detail at your earlier sessions. But I'm happy to report the opinions that we've rendered on the financial statements are clean in all respects. So the basic financial statements have an unmodified opinion. That's our expression that based on our testing, we believe they're free of any material misstatement and they conform to all of the required accounting principles. Likewise, relative to the federal awards programs, the major programs which were tested for compliance this year were your Title I programs and your child nutrition programs. And another shout out to Mr. Francis for his help with that. But all clean reports, no findings, no question costs, and no internal control matters that were required to be reported. So that's terrific. I will turn it over to Tom. We have a graph presentation to take you through just some of the key financial highlights, and then we'll respond to any questions.
Thank you.
Good evening, board members.
Good evening. Good evening.
I'll start with slide 2, and that covers the governmental funds balance sheet. And it segregates out the fund level activity by major funds and then consolidates the non-major fund activity. So we show total assets, total liabilities, and total fund balance between the major and non-major funds. A couple of numbers I'd like to point your attention to. So the general fund has unassigned fund balance of $7.7 million at June 30th, 2016. The 2013 Series 1 and Series 2 bond funds have approximately $100 million of restricted fund balance at year end relating to unspent bond proceeds. The remaining non-major governmental funds have fund balance associated with the special revenue debt service, and capital projects funds. Moving along to slide 3. This slide presents a budget to actual summary for the general fund. So as you can see, the general fund came in $4 million of excess revenue over expenditures at year end, approximately doubling your fund balance. And as Mike said, the fund balance percentage currently stands at about 5.7%, which allowed you to exit from the early legislation warning. The total expenditures came in 1.5% favorable to budget, and the total fund balance at year end came in favorable by 5.9% of total expenditures. On slide 4, we have some general comments regarding the second year of GASB 68 implementation. And as a recap, this GASB 68 standard just represents the school district's assigned proportionate share of the underfunded net pension liability for the MIPSR's retirement program. There's no fund level impact, and the rating agencies had already taken this into consideration, so there shouldn't be any effect on the school district's ratings. And across most of the school districts that have participation in the MIPSR's program, they will show net position deficits at year end. Slide 5 provides a summary of assets, liabilities, and net position on a government-wide and fund-level basis. So the main differences here just involve capital assets, long-term bonded debt, and the related pension obligations on the government-wide level compared to the fund level. And as you can see, the GASB 68 liability on the district-wide comes in at about a $260 million impact, and there's no impact on the fund level. On slide 6, we have a chart that illustrates the breakout of general fund revenue. Of course, the biggest component is approximately 77% of total general fund revenue relates to state aid, and local source revenue involving primarily property taxes comes in at about 20%. The next slide provides a further breakout of the significant component that is the state aid foundation allowance. So as you can see, of the $145 million of general fund revenue, 68% of that's represented by the per pupil revenue provided by the state foundation allowance. On slide 8, we have a breakout of the general fund expenditures. As you can see, the salaries and employee benefits represent the majority, the overwhelming majority of the general fund expenditures at about almost 90%, or $130 million. On slide 9, we have a line graph that just illustrates the general fund revenues and expenditures. So you can see that in 2011, the revenue decreased significantly, and since 2011, the revenues trended upward to the current year position where we're at about $146 million. And we have favorable downticks in expenditures in 2016, which has allowed your fund balance to grow that much more. Slide 10 provides a chart of the fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. So you can see the 5.7% levels at year-end 2016, and the red line on the bottom shows the corresponding increase in foundation allowance of 0.9%. So the district had a pretty favorable operating year to allow the overall fund balance to increase by to 5.7% based on 0.9% of foundation allowance increase. The final slide provides an overview of 10-year history of the retirement cost at the districts for the MIPSR's expense. So as you can see, since 2012, the costs bore by the district have stabilized. However, total retirement costs have increased in recent years, and you can see that the pink regions represent the Section 147 payments received from the state and remitted back to the state to cover the increasing retirement cost of the district. So the district's total retirement cost in the current year is about $35 million. $12 million of that approximately is borne by the state, and $23 million is paid for by the district.
And we view that as one of the, the greatest areas for uncertainty as you plan for the future. The state has been able to provide that funding through growth in the state aid fund. Should there no longer be that growth, those 35% contribution rates will fall back fully on the shoulders of districts to balance from their current operating budgets. And so that is one of the primary drivers why we think rebuilding fund balance at districts is so critical of an issue. We're in a good economy, and we know that won't last forever.
That concludes our presentation, and we're open for any questions that you may have.
Questions by the board? Mrs. Bonnefield.
I'd like to go back to slide 9 if we can. And I love slide 9. It looks great. But I'd like either Superintendent Oquist or one of you to just talk a little bit about how it's not the state, it's not because the state's giving us more money or the state is appropriately funding us, that the reason that we have this is because we have sold property and done some other one-time revenues. We've got the cell towers. That increase in income is sacrifices that the district has made in one-time generated revenue, and as well as, it's great that we've taken our expenditures down, but that's at the price of, different things in our schools, lack of textbooks that we haven't been purchasing. If we lose some of our employees during the year, we don't always refill those positions. So although this is a really a nice graph, and it looks like that's great in that, why do we complain about where we're at with our funding, that this really is a false indicator of how we're actually funded by the state and where this comes from and the sacrifices that the district and our children, most of all, have had to make in order to get to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you look to those early years on that graph, that dramatic decrease in funding that occurred in that 2009 to 2011 period, $470 per pupil in the foundation allowance, and the loss of the Special 20J funds. And so, Livonia certainly responded with, major spending challenges and reacted appropriately to control the spending so that you averted a deficit. But you are absolutely making do with far less in terms of funding than you previously had, and have taken advantage of one-time revenue sources.
Mrs. Oquist, thank you. Would you please forward to the next slide? I think this is also a telling slide, and Tom, I believe you touched on this when you shared your information, and it was something I took note of. And I think it also gets to your point, Mrs. Bonnefield. If you take a look at this year and you look at the fund balance percentage moving from 2.9% to 5.7%, it is a significant growth, and it comes with very, very little increase in revenue by the state. And so when you see the foundation allowance increase at less than 1%, which doesn't even come close to the rising costs related to the work that we do and to the costs that we incur. That is a direct result of this board and our district administration putting in place very stringent measures with regard to cost containment, revenue enhancement. We know, certainly we've encountered wage stagnation for many years in our district. So there are many, many pieces that go to the commitment of this board and our district administration to increase our fund balance, specifically moving toward working out of being an early warning district. But that comes with very, very little support from the state. Again, less than 1% of our overall revenue. And so that has really come with, as you know, many months of planning and year after year. That's not just this year. That comes on the heels of many months of planning with regard to specific revenue enhancement as also a piece recommended by our community, but something we were able to move forward, as well as many cost containment measures, including having many folks take on additional responsibilities until the time where we could close out a school year or fill those positions. And that is, again, goes back to the people that we have serving this district, really doing a tremendous job. So just wanted to point that out. I think this slide is as illustrated of your point, Mrs. Bonifield, as the one prior.
Questions or comments from other board members? Mr. Centers.
I just also want to acknowledge that while we think it's important for the state to go ahead and support the funding of our retirement, our MIPSERBs expenses, we heard Thursday at our school funding forum that the state has not always been good stewards of that money. There have been years where they did not put money into that account, and even in 1979, they not only did not put money in, but they took money out to help their budgets. So we have to remember that some of these school liabilities are not necessarily the fault of just schools, but the state does play a role in that as well.
Other questions and comments? Along the line of what the topic Mr. Centers had brought up, I'm asked, and I'm sure others are asked also, what about the conflicting statements that the state is saying that they're spending more on education, and we're saying we have less to work with?
And both are actually true. So total state dollars in support of education have grown in recent years, but the amounts going out to districts have not even come close to recovering from the cuts of many years ago. That extra funding is really all being directed directly towards that retirement system. It's a little bit of fun and games the way they have the school districts report it as revenue and then send it right back as expenditure, because you have no discretion over those funds whatsoever.
No. And again, what Mrs. Pollack is saying, for those who may not be aware, we literally receive a many $million check from the state, to which we have to deposit it into our account, turn around and write that exact check to a penny back to the state. And therefore, they've spent the money on education, but we have to give it all right back. So there's a little explanation of what's going on, why we are receiving less that we can put into our classrooms, and yet the state is saying they're spending more on education. It's really more being spent on the retirement system, but it's not more being spent on our classrooms.
Mrs. Burton.
Mrs. McDonald.
Thank you. Mrs. Pollack, with the retirement system, and every year we've seen, increases, considerable increases. At what point does anyone have an idea when this might level off or go the other way?
Yeah, I think the structural changes that were enacted, I have not heard of forecasted kind of total rates going above this kind of 35% level that they're at today. We do think that there are structural changes that, although they take many years to take effect, are going to, kind of keep that limit down. The other thing that obviously is coming into play would be the funding that goes in to fund the healthcare subsidies for retirees. So that program has now been capped for people coming into that program. That's still that is not pre-funded at all. That's pay as you go, and that's part of the contribution rates that you're making. So that will help to stabilize. There is an upcoming accounting change in 2018 that's going to bring those liabilities out to your financial statements just like the pension change with GASB 68 from last year as well.
Thank you.
So I think the biggest near-term fear that we have is that $12 million of funding that the state has, provided to you and taken immediately back to fund. If they can't do that, that's on just for a single year basis, that's $12 million, and your fund balance is only $8 million. So there again, that's a scary situation. I think that's part of why the early warning legislation is out there, is because Lansing is so concerned that districts have enough cushion to weather these sorts of changes.
And I asked you this in the committee of the whole meeting, but I'm going to ask again, for the benefit of the public. We've exceeded now the 5%, so we are no longer considered an early warning district, which is an enormous kudos to the district and to the employees of the district who have worked very, very hard to make sure that we've gotten to that level. That takes us off the early warning list. What is the recommended fund balance to be able to be financially sound?
Yes, so I mean, Michigan school business officials has always used a threshold of 15% as their recommended fund balance to provide enough stability to weather, big spikes in what comes from the state, which does happen with our cyclical economy here in Michigan, coupled with minimizing the need to borrow for cash flow purposes. So 15% is what has long been recommended. Most districts in the past 5 years have not been able to maintain that level. The state average, if we exclude Detroit Public Schools from the mix because of their deficit, we don't include them, is about 10.5% is state average. So you and you are a large district are still about half of what the state average is.
Other questions, comments?
I was going to say, one of the other comments that adversely, just to make a comment that adversely affects the pension program is the number of participants in the program as it tries to feed out, and that's been declining rapidly as there's an effort at the state level and with some districts to balance out some resources to outsource. And then you take those resources from people that were paying into the fund, and they're no longer in the fund. So when you look at the number of people that have actually been contributing over a period of years, it's going down, and it's causing the rate to go up to counteract part of that.
And another contributing factor would be charter schools, which for the most part
Right.
are using contracted staff as opposed to active participants as well.
Right. And there's other components to early warning legislation that can, the 5% is just not the variable, it's the big one, but there's some other components that can get you into trouble. Not in that situation, but one of them is persistently declining enrollment. And that's a variable where they kick out the 5% and then they go after another angle.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson, do you have a question or a comment? No. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Well, the board had a great deal of discussion with you at our committee of the whole and another level of discussion here tonight, so thank you very much for being here. We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mr. Centers. Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And thank you both for
Thank you
working
so
with our
much.
district for many, many years. We appreciate it. The next item on our agenda this evening is item 7C, approval of IDEA technology purchase. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. McDonald.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District purchase 100 LG Chrome-based computers for $31,900 from CDWG LLC and 20 iPads, $11,060 from the Apple Store for a total cost of $42,960.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. McDonald, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. And Dr. Terrio.
Thank you, President Burton. As we have discussed at a study session and a committee of the whole meeting, we are in support of ordering the 100 Chrome-based computers and 20 iPads for our students with IEPs. The additional technology purchased with IDEA funds will be used to increase our students' access to accommodations such as text-to-speech and snap and read, as well as supplementary aids and services to support statewide assessments. Additionally, our iPads will be utilized to increase our preschool students' socialization and communication skills. We support the approval of this motion.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from the board or superintendent? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. McDonald, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. McDonald? Yes. Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is 7D, approval of bulk salt purchase. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mr. Johnson.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of bulk road salt through the State of Michigan My Deal Purchasing Consortium for an approximate total cost amount of $63,555.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Bonnefield. And Mr. Dickerson.
Yes, it's almost that time of the year again. Not a time that we look forward to, but this is an attempt to purchase the salt needed to keep the sidewalks and driveways and parking lots clear of ice and snow this winter. It's a reduction from last year's bid of $11.61 a ton. We're going to purchase about 1,500 tons of rolled salt. The last couple of years, we've used anywhere from 1,100 to 1,800 to 2,000. So hopefully the 1,500 tons gets us through the winter. And maybe we'll have some leftovers because we're going to have a milder winter. That's not necessarily true, but.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, it would be.
You heard it.
Always is.
We'll hold you.
Yes. Any questions or comments from the board or superintendent? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Bonnefield. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald? Yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is 7E, appointment of treasurer. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mr. Centers.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District appoint Ms. Allison Smith, Director of Finance, as the Treasurer of Livonia Public Schools School District.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. McDonald. And Mrs. Oquist, would you like to speak to this item?
I would, thank you. As you know, Ms. Lisa Abbey, our former Assistant Superintendent for Business Services, was previously named treasurer during our organizational meeting in January of 2016. Ms. Abbey has left the district's employment, and so this is the next regular board meeting after Ms. Smith was appointed. As you know, Ms. Smith was appointed the Director of Finance at our last regular board meeting. Traditionally, the person serving in the role of overseeing finance in our Business Services Department has served as treasurer, and we would recommend Ms. Smith take on that role this evening.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. McDonald. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald? Yes. Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is 7F, designation of director and alternate director for Maisel Insurance Pool. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District ask that Allison Smith be named Director and the Finance Manager be named Alternate Director to the Maisel Metropolitan Association for Improved School Legislation Joint Risk Management Pool.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Laura. Mrs. Oquist.
Thank you. So again, another organizational, we have two more of these items this evening. Livonia Public Schools participates in Maisel. It's an insurance pool for property casualty, liability, automobile, and crime insurance for the district. Each district of the pool is required to have a director designated for voting purposes and also an alternate director. So again, with Ms. Abby's exit from the district, we would like to name Ms. Smith as the director for our district to be represented at Maisel, and then our finance manager to be appointed would be the alternate director for Maisel. Again, Mr. Armeligus was the alternate. He was our administrator for finance, and he will be leaving the district at the end of this month. His position will not be replaced, but the finance manager position, which was Ms. Smith's old position, will be. And so that person would serve as the alternate director for Maisel. So we would recommend both those positions be filled in that manner.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Laura. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is 7G, appointment of staff member to be in charge of elections. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mrs. Laura.
Thank you. Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District acknowledge the appointment of the Director of Operations as the staff member in charge of school elections for the 2016-2017 school year. This appointment is made by the Board Secretary with formal acknowledgement by the Board of Education. First job.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Laura, supported by Mr. Centers. Mrs. Oquist.
Yes, and again, this is our final motion this evening in this regard. There was a lot of vying on cabinet for this role. And so, yes, there was a lot of excitement and spirited recommendations. But previously, since this responsibility has fallen under the cabinet member who oversees operations, we would ask that Mr. Francis be given this responsibility by Secretary Bonnefield. Again, the staff person serves in this capacity at the pleasure of the secretary and would need to be reappointed every year. So you never know, someone else may have an option at that job sometime in the future. But for right now, we would recommend that Mr. Francis take on that role.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board that you care to share? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Laura and supported by Mr. Centers. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. And President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We are on to item 8, reports from the superintendent. Mrs. Oquist.
Thank you, President Burton. We have a lot of good news to share with you this evening, so I'll move through each of these items. I would like to recognize Jacob Fuhrer. He is Livonia's newest Eagle Scout. Jacob began his scouting career with Cub Scout Pack 907 at Hoover Elementary. He earned all ranks in the Arrow of Light, the highest award in Cub Scouting. Jacob is a senior at Livonia Stevenson. He is captain of the varsity boys swim and dive team and has a 4.38 grade point average.
Wow.
This summer, he worked as a camp aide at Schoolcraft College and participated in an internship with Ford Motor Company. Let me say again, he was just entering his senior year of high school at that point in time. He has done a tremendous job. I've had the pleasure of knowing the Fuhrer family for a number of years, and we wish our heartiest congratulations and best wishes to Jacob as he continues to exemplify the best of our Livonia Public Schools students. Congratulations to our Lady Warriors. As you know, we have an outstanding robotics team in our district, and we have a group of young women from the Warriors who participate in competitions across the state. They have competed in 3 different competitions. Most recently, competed last month in
Grand Rapids.
And they took first place. The Lady Warriors have been in 3 competitions. They have been first place in each of those 3 competitions. They continue to do an outstanding job, and as Mrs. Jarvis shared with me this evening, 3 of our Lady Warriors serve as co-captains of the Warrior team in Livonia. So congratulations to all of them. I hope you had an opportunity to hear a little bit about Manufacturing Day, which took place on October 7th. We had almost 600 students participating in Livonia's Manufacturing Day, coordinated by Schoolcraft College, the Chamber, Livonia Public Schools, and a number of our wonderful business partners. The schools involved were Emerson, Holmes, Frost, and Clarenceville. Previously, we only had one of our middle schools participating. This is the second year, and we had all 3 of our schools invited to participate. I want to identify our business partners who welcomed our students in to hear about the manufacturing at their companies: NYX, Roush Performance Technologies, Alpha USA, Quality Metalcraft, McLaren Engineering, and Delta Gear. And additionally, the students toured a number of applied science laboratories at Schoolcraft College. They had lunch provided by Schoolcraft College and enjoyed industry displays from Linear AMS, Key Plastics, and Standard Die in Fabricating. This was almost a year in its planning. And again, Dan West from the Chamber and many of our business partners, along with our friends at Schoolcraft College, worked very, very hard to bring an outstanding day together for our students. I'd invite you to take a look on our website. Stacy Jenkins and Nick Alderink have put together an outstanding article and a video highlighting Manufacturing Day. So you'll get an opportunity to see a little sneak peek of what our students experienced. It was truly a tremendous day and really focused on bringing to light the careers and opportunities in manufacturing available to our children, so in the future. I would like to acknowledge we received notice from Churchill High School announced that the following students have been named commended students into the 2017 National Merit Scholarship Program. The students are Nolan Daly, Benjamin Dietrich, Alicia Erickson, Noah Hagood, Tyler Opdyke, Matthew Rodman, Elizabeth Rubinson, Rebecca Skady, and Nolan Swatnick. A letter of commendation from the school and the National Merit Scholarship Corporation were presented by the principal to these scholastically talented seniors. Coming up next Monday, mark your calendars, we have the grand opening of the Franklin High School Performing Arts Center. This day has seemed like it's been a long time coming. We are so excited to welcome the community to Franklin High School and specifically to the spectacular Performing Arts Center. Monday, October 24th, I'll give you some times on that. From 4 to 5 p.m., we're welcoming the community around Franklin High School as a thank you for excusing our dust for the past 18 months as we've infringed and encroached upon their space in that area. They've been wonderful neighbors to us, and we've also invited our staff to attend during that time. And then we have an open house from 5 to 6:30 with an official ribbon cutting at 5:30 p.m. in the front of the Performing Arts Center. I know some of you were able to be there last Thursday for a pre-grand opening event of our school funding forum, and I think you would agree that it really is a spectacular addition to the Franklin school community, and we are so excited to be working on that same type of facility over at Stevenson. We have we had Diane Policelli from the Livonia Public Schools Education Foundation here this evening. I want to note that on Tuesday, November 29th, we have Devin Skillion coming as our keynote speaker for our annual luncheon. This is the most significant fundraiser for the foundation for the Competitive Edge Scholarship Program, which provides the seed money for a college savings account for each of our incoming kindergarten students who sign up, whose parents sign up to be part of the program. We're excited to welcome back Steve Courtney. I'm assuming he'll have a few things to talk about with us in the area of sports. But we're certainly excited to welcome Devin Skillion, and that's at the St. Mary's Banquet Center again on November 29th from noon to 1:30. If you are interested, there's more information on our website. I'd like to provide an important update to the community with regard to the District Enrollment and Building Utilization Committee. I want to talk a little bit about the timeline that we have going forward. I know board members, you're familiar with this, but I'd just like to take a minute to talk about it with all of our community. As you know, we commissioned last December Plant Moran Cressa to complete 2 significant studies for us in the district, one on enrollment, enrollment currently and future enrollment trends over the coming years, and also do an in-depth facility use study for us. They brought that information back to the Board of Education, to District Administration last April, at which time we commenced a committee of 45 stakeholders in our district, which we entitled the District Enrollment and Building Utilization Committee, led at that time by Mr. Steve Archibald and Ms. Lisa Abbey. That committee has been to work throughout the spring. They took a hiatus during their summer recess because most of the folks on that team are off during summer break. They have come back with earnest, and they have now 3 or 4 remaining meetings. That committee is now chaired by Mr. Archibald and Dr. Terriel. They will be meeting with their committee again. They have met already 3 times this year. 2 times this year. They will be meeting this Friday for another half a day, November 3rd, to finalize recommendations for the Board of Education at their November 3rd meeting. Then the committee, members of the committee and district administration will take some time over the next 2 weeks after that to prepare the final presentation to the Board of Education. And then we will provide to the Board of Education and to our community on the evening of Monday, November 21st. We will have a committee of the whole meeting with one agenda item, the presentation of the committee's recommendations. So at that time, we will share a summary of the information that was shared in June regarding the 2 studies that were completed to bring everyone back up to speed. And then we will go through significantly detailed information with regard to current enrollment, current facility use, and recommendations from the committee with regard to any potential for school closings and consolidation, with regard to use of facilities, and perhaps relocation of programs within our district to more optimal facilities. We will then, after the November 21st meeting, that's on Monday, we will have an opportunity the following week to hold community forums. We know it's very important for the board to hear community feedback from our parents, from our staff, from our community as a whole, and we want to provide that opportunity to them. So during the week of November 28th, we will have 2 evening community forum sessions, time and location to be announced. We will finalize those dates this week. We will send them out to the community via email. We will also post them on the special section on our website that has been utilized throughout the process to keep our community updated. We'll hold those community forums. Then we will bring back the large committee again to sort through all of the feedback received in the forums and to make a determination if there are any changes that should be made to their recommendations, any tweaks, any additional questions, any additional data that we need to collect. The team will meet again on December 7th, and then we will come back to the Board of Education again with an updated presentation based on the feedback from the community forums and based on the feedback from the committee. We will do that on December 12th at a committee of the whole meeting. We will review the recommendations, and if there were any changes made to those made on November 21st. And again, at that meeting, as with all meetings, there are opportunities for the community to provide input via audience communication. And then finally, we will bring the final recommendations to the board at the regular board meeting of December 19th, at which time the board we propose that the board would vote on any final recommendations of the committee brought forth to them. So I just wanted to be sure to review that schedule. There is quite a bit still to consider over the next 2 months, but we have a number of opportunities not only to complete our work, but also to bring the work out to the board and to the community, to get feedback, to respond to that feedback, and then to come back again to the board. We've really tried to put a lot of thought into opportunities to take all of the information that we get in and be able to make any appropriate modifications to the recommendations before a final vote on December 19th. So at this time, I'd like to open it up to any questions or clarifications from the board on where we are. I welcome Mr. Archibald, Dr. Terrell to add anything to that update.
Okay, are there questions or comments from board members on the update? Mrs. McDonald.
Thank you, President Burton. Mrs. Alquist, I was wondering, because a lot of the information that you're giving tonight to everyone and to the community, if you could possibly email that information to all the stakeholders. Because I know a lot of people don't necessarily watch our meetings. So I think that would probably help keep the communication lines open, and then that way folks might not be so concerned, or, if they do have concerns, then they have at least the opportunity to come and hear what we have to say.
Yes, if I did not mention that earlier, we absolutely plan to do that via email this week. So we'll be sending out an email reminder to folks to remind them about the schoolhouse button we have had on the website, which continuously has each committee packet as we review it. So all of the data and information that the committee is reviewing, we're putting back out onto the website for the community's review. And then we will absolutely let them know of the schedule of dates related to community meetings. Yes, absolutely.
And along that line also, Mrs. Oquist and I talked earlier today, I believe, Mr. Archibald, Dr. Terrell, Mrs. Oquist already had planned on contacting the Observer newspaper in case there are folks who may not be checking with our website, but that do read the newspaper, and letting them know so they have up-to-date information also.
Absolutely.
We don't have control over when they publish that information, but we can provide it in a timely manner.
Absolutely. We are very desirous of people attending and hearing in depth, not only the recommendations, because sometimes it's one thing if you hear the end result. It's really important to us that folks have an opportunity to go back and remember what the impetus was for these studies, what we learned during each of these studies, and then, again, finally, the recommendations being brought forward.
Questions or comments from other board members? Mr. Archibald or Dr. Terrell, is there anything you'd like to add?
Nothing to add.
Okay, all righty. Anything else, Mrs. Oquist?
No, my one last comment is I'd like to thank anyone who attended our town hall meeting last week on our school funding forum. We were very pleased to bring together members of our community, Plymouth, Canton, Wayne Westland, and Van Buren, to hear about an extremely important topic, as you saw this evening, that we highlighted during our audit report, the issue of adequate school funding. One of the pieces we shared was information on the upcoming Wayne County Education Enhancement Millage. Members of Cabinet and I are going out to each of our school staffs and each of our school parent groups to share information about this, but we also would encourage the community to take a look at the information on our website as well as our link to the website at Wayne County RESA for you to gather more information about the Wayne County Education Enhancement Millage, which will be on the ballot November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 9, hearing from board members. And 9A is approval for board trustees to take MASB classes. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve that board trustees may take CBA classes in Lansing, Michigan on December 9 and 10 for a total cost of up to $1,530. Currently planned expenditures: Mrs. Bonnefield, 3 classes at $90 for $270. President Burton, 2 classes at $90 for $180. Mr. Centers, 2 classes at $90 for $180. Mrs. Jarvis, 2 classes at $90 for $180. Mr. Johnson, 2 classes at $90 for $180. Incoming trustees, 3 at $90 each for $270, and a second incoming trustee, 3 at $90 for $270, for a total of $1,530. Sorry, Mr. Johnson.
Support.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mr. Johnson. Mrs. Oquist.
Yes. As you know, we truly value the opportunity for our board members to attend development opportunities such as this regarding education, finance, leadership development via conferences or seminars. Per board policy BBBC, those expenditures require board approval. And so we would support, certainly support all of the board members listed here, moving forward to take these classes in Lansing, Michigan on either December 9th or 10th, including opportunities for our incoming trustees to do so if they choose to do so after the election.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mr. Johnson. Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And I would like to pass my commending on to our Board of Education also. The only requirements to being a member of the Board of Education are being 18 years old and being a registered voter and living in the district. That's it. The level of decisions that you've seen a sampling of tonight take a lot more education than that. I commend our board members for taking their own time on largely evenings and weekends to become educated in many, many different areas, as Mrs. Oquist went over a sampling of them. We take our board service very seriously, and we thank our community for supporting us in these efforts. The next item on our agenda is item 9B, a hearing from board members. As is customary with our Board of Education, rather than having 7 of us repeat the same thank yous to many of our honorees of the evening and other appropriate folks, we have asked that one individual from each of our board on any given evening take those duties. Certainly, if there are other members of our board who would like to add anything afterward, they are most welcome to do so. This evening, Mrs. McDonald will be taking care of hearing from board members for us.
Thank you, President Burton. Well, I first would like to congratulate our participants to our very kickoff 2016-17 Art Gallery from Churchill High School. Their beautiful work is amazing, and as board members, we get to view this artwork for the next 30 days, which we appreciate it. And acknowledgements go to Destiny Banks, Cameron Burke, Kaylee Turnbull, Paige Hansen, and Emily Lane. Secondly, to thank our staff this evening for their integral part of the Technology Bond Professional Development Committee for all their hard work and dedication to our students and our community. I'd like to acknowledge Judy Bowling, Karen Komzik, Tim Clan, Jill Manchester, Christine Mitchell, David Mitchell, Lisa Zayar, and Sheila Alice. Thirdly, a big thank you to ZFTRW Automotive for their generous donation of $3,500 to Livonia Public Livonia Public Schools to purchase items for our early literacy programs to support our lower grades. This contribution brings continuous support to Livonia Public Schools for the past 17 years with donations for a grand total of $79,000, which is truly, truly amazing. And thank you for John Wilkerson for coming out and representing ZFTRW Automotive. For as many years as I've been coming to these meetings, he's been here, so I'm sure we look forward to him attending and coming again next year. Also, along with this $3,500 donation, they have donated $1,500 to the LPS foundations. So we truly, truly appreciate everything that they do for us in our community. Congratulations to Phil Francis, our new Director of Operations. I know Phil will do a wonderful job. He's a very smart guy, and I'm sure he'll grow professionally and grow into this job. Heads up, Phil, I'm sure it's a lot of work. But thank you so much for taking this on, and thank you for Andrea for taking time to choose her staff and very carefully, so thank you. Congratulations to our new teachers, our teachers for tenure, and our retirees, which are the opposite end of the new teachers. So congratulations to everyone, and we appreciate everything you do for Livonia Public Schools. And lastly, we went through our audit again this year, and I know it's a lot of work, and I know the board appreciates everything
that our business department does for our school district to keep everything in place. And thank you for all your hard work. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you. Are there any additions from other board members that they'd like to add? Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Burton. I would like to let the public know that this past week there was an MSBOA Marching Band Festival. Both Stevenson and Churchill sent their marching bands to compete in the festival. Each of the teams came away with top marks. They earned a 1 in each of the grading categories, which is commendable. It represents an incredible amount of dedication on behalf of all of these young people and the staff that helps bring out the best in them. So kudos to both the marching band from Stevenson and from Churchill.
Thank you. Other board members would like to contribute anything? A couple of things I'd like to add. Kudos to our transportation department. Mrs. Oquist let us know this in an update just recently, that our transportation received a certificate of excellence for the 2015-2016 year from the Michigan State Police for achieving a 100% pass rate for our school buses. That is no small feat when you're a district as large as we are with the fleet that we have. So kudos to our transportation supervisor, Peggy Stefron, and our fleet maintenance supervisor, Todd Dixon, and all of our mechanics, our drivers, and all of those who work in transportation. That can be one of our toughest jobs in our district, and they do it very, very well. So thank you. Congratulations also. Athletic Director Mark Haig sent this along to the board just recently. The Lady Chargers from Churchill High School. The girls cross country team won the KLAA South Division Championship, and the girls volleyball team won the KLAA South Division Championship just recently. So congratulations to those ladies. If you're looking for something fun to do in our district, there are so many activities going on any night of the week. Many of our sports teams from the fall are going into playoffs right now. Many of our drama programs are kicking in for their season of fall and holiday performances. So please do, if you're looking for something to do in an evening, consider what's right literally in your backyard and go support our students and have a really enjoyable evening. Many of these activities are either for a nominal fee or free to our senior citizens. So please do support our students and have an enjoyable evening. Anything else from any other board members? Seeing none, we are at the end of our agenda. I wish you a nice evening. We are now adjourned.